So, good afternoon, good morning for some of the attendees, good evening for others, since we have today a large audience spread all over the world. I start congratulating the Center for this initiative and to thank for the invitation. My name is Conceição Santos, and let me start by saying that I'm delighted to be here today with all of you and with Claire Joly to talk about how important it is to have better knowledge about the ocean economy and how we can do that. She will show us the huge potential of the national accounts for this purpose. We promise one more interesting Network Friday section. I'm the Deputy Director of the Directorate-General for Maritime Policy in the framework of the Ministry of Sea in Portugal. But the most important is that I have been working since 2010 in data and statistics to have better and more comprehensive information about the Portuguese ocean economy and make visible, accessible and comparable what at that time were just invisible based on empirical knowledge or even not known, and in most cases not comparable, including at international level. At the time, we realized that it was a common reality worldwide, despite one had more information than the others, but the comparability was not guaranteed at all. That's why we brought international project under the National Ocean Strategy, the main professional organizations, the Portuguese Maritime Cluster, and main players of the Portuguese ocean economy to work with us and the National Statistics Institute to develop a new statistical instrument, an instrument based on the information already available in the National Statistics Institute that could be organized to measure the ocean economy in a comprehensive way and in a way that could follow statistical principles agreed at international level. As a result of this amazing collective will and cooperative work, that is our secret, the secret of our success, the Portuguese satellite account for the sea was born in 2016. I can say that a satellite account for the ocean economy is a kind of algorithm that makes a zoom in the national accounts of the country, tailored to the ocean economy. In the end, it can be seen as a kind of census of the ocean economy, and it is the mother of every other complementary statistics and administrative data on ocean economy. Nowadays, the Portuguese satellite account is part of the official statistics, and official results have been published. This is the proof that it can be implemented successfully. We did not stop to improve data and methodology, trying to have better results. And we are deeply committed with the OECD to test the approach and share our experience. We will continue working to enlarge the scope to include the environmental perspective in the context of the environmental and ecosystem service accounts. This is the next step. Let me stop for now, because today we have here with us Claire Joly. She is the head of unit in the Directorate for Science, Technology and Innovation in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. She is in charge of the OECD research and analysis on the economics and innovation dimensions of two important frontiers domains, the ocean and the space environment. Many economic activities, as well as much science and innovation, are linked to the exploration and sustainable uses of the ocean and of the space environment. Claire Joly has over 20 years of experience in business and policy analysis, supporting decision-making and strategic planning in public and private organizations in Europe and North America. She joined the OECD in 2003. She had authored and contributed to over 50 publications, books, reports, articles, focusing on the evolution and economic impacts of science and technology-intensive sectors. Her background is in international economics, University of Versailles, Cornell University. Engineering with a special interest in the space sector. She is also alumna of the French Institute for Higher National Defense Studies in Paris and of the Singularity University in Santa Clara, US. Claire, the floor is all yours.
Conceição, thank you so much. And it's always so lovely to be with you in a meeting, even though we're still virtually here. So I first would like really to thank Jose Luis Monteño and the Air Center for this invitation to come and share with you some of the work that we are doing with many countries around the world on the ocean economy. So I will share my screen to bring up the PowerPoint that I'm gonna show. The objective of this meeting here, oops, here we go. So the objective of this meeting is really here to share with you some recent work that we have been doing at the OECD, and more globally to reflect on the importance of first measuring the ocean economy, but also in exploring how satellite accounting, which is a very strange statistical system for people who are not much aware of this statistical framework, but how satellite accounting can be so useful to actually provide evidence for a better and improved sustainable ocean economy. So I'll provide here quite a number of slides. They will be definitely shared after the presentation, and I'll be looking forward to the questions. So to start with, maybe just a few words about where I'm coming from here. The OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation in Development, it's an international economic organization which deals with many of the ocean sectors that many of you are actually working in or are aware of. We have different committees that are looking, for instance, at fisheries. We have a committee on fishery. We have a committee on shipbuilding. We do have work in our Directorate for Environment on biodiversity, on the economics of climate change, on plastics. We also have many different activities with our sister organization, the International Energy Agency on renewable energy. So quite a lot of substance here that links to ocean. But one key message here that I have is that the OECD role is really to provide data, economic statistics, and evidence, policy advice to our member states. This is really a key activity for the OECD. So definitely quite a lot of substance on ocean, as well as this key role to provide economic statistics, economic research analysis, policy guidance. So within the OECD, I work for STI, the Science, Technology and Innovation Directorate. It used to be called the Science, Technology and Industry Directorate. Hence our mission here related to the ocean economy. We're providing a holistic view of the ocean economic activities and their sustainability aspects with two main pillars in our activity. We are measuring ocean economic activities. Remember what I talked about STI industry. This is really the background, I would say, for much of the work going on in STI, strong data on industry, so measurement of ocean economic activities, but we are also really looking forward to the next steps, I would say, in the future of the ocean, looking at science, technology, and innovation as drivers of ocean sustainability. So these two pillars are actually very much linked in our daily activities. And here, in this particular presentation, I will focus more on the measurement of ocean economic activities, although there are many, many linkages. Here, there are a number of reports. There are much more that you can find on our website. What we do specifically in the STI Ocean Economy Group, we have four main activities. I just mentioned them here, so to give you a bit more substance on what we're doing. The first one I mentioned, measuring ocean economic activities, taking into account the sustainability aspects. But we are also looking at different fields that are of key interest for policymakers these days. The first one has to do with the ocean economy knowledge and innovation networks, how different partners in the public and the private sector, as well as academia, research centers, philanthropy, NGOs, citizen science, how all these actors are actually working together. We are also providing evidence on the economics of sustained ocean observations. We have a paper that will be published very soon on a very nice survey that we conducted on marine data repositories in the UK. And that was a close cooperation with our colleagues from the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, IOC also. So sustained ocean observations, which we believe will provide a lot of the data that's going to be useful when we take a look at future satellite accounts. And we are also working closely with the ocean science community in terms of STI-related indicators. As many of you may know, the UN Ocean Science Decade is starting now, and we do need a number of indicators to actually keep track of the impacts of this Ocean Science Decade. So you see quite a number of activities here, but I will really focus now on measuring ocean economic activities. Taking a step back, the ocean economy is for us at the OECD a very interactive, interdependent system. The good news is that we're getting to know this system much better. This is a graph that was published back in 2016 when we produced our first big report on the ocean economy called the Ocean Economy to 2030. And that was a bit of an eye-opener, I would say, for a number of actors around the world in terms of how important the ocean economy could be to their national economy and to the global economy in general. But for statistical purposes, for us, the ocean economy has these two pillars: the ocean-based industries, ocean economic activities, that are sometimes easy to measure, sometimes much more difficult. I'll come back to that. But also the crucial marine ecosystems that many of these industries rely on. These marine ecosystems, we are starting to get them, to get a better understanding also of them scientifically, but there's still so many unknowns. But at the end of the day, what we're saying here in terms of statistics to actually improve evidence and decision-making, we need to put a dollar figure. This can be discussed, but at the end of the day, to really take into account a broad ocean economy, and that will translate in holistic ocean accounts, we need to be able to measure these two pillars: ocean economic activities as well as the marine ecosystems. So what we're seeing clearly, that's something that we described already back in 2016, and this acceleration has just been going crazy in some places, is that ocean economic activities are really increasing globally. There was a bit of a stop, obviously, during the first stages of the COVID pandemic, but what we're seeing is that for most of the ocean economic activities that are really growing fast, the growth is still going to be even stronger over the next decade. Just to give you here a couple of examples, in terms of maritime ports, they handled a record number of containers in 2019. 2020, with the COVID situation, brought almost an halt in many parts of the world. But today, we know that in the container industry, profits have never been so high. The economic growth in many countries is really starting really fast again. And we're seeing this, obviously, in maritime shipping, for instance, and in ports activities. In terms of energy, ocean renewable electricity is, of course, a key topic for many parts of the world, many countries around the world. And offshore wind has just been growing very fast. This was actually identified back in our report in 2016 as one of the fastest growing sector in the ocean economy. So we do have quite a lot of numbers, I would say, in terms of how fast some of the ocean economic activities are growing. But is that enough to actually base some of the decisions from policymakers? Well, many of the indicators that are used today, they use data from different sources and they rely on very different metrics of outputs, tons. They use watts. So we don't have, for all industry sectors that we are looking at, I would say common, I would say benchmarks to actually compare the different sectors. It's sometimes quite difficult. Why are we wanting to have such types of number? Is that we really need, at the end of the day, to be able to capture the potential impacts of these industries on the marine environment and beyond, on the environment in general. This is going to be very important as we look forward to the future of the ocean. The ocean health is obviously not going very well. The impacts of climate change are growing. There's an acceleration in biodiversity loss. Clearly, we need to be able not only to take stock of how fast some of the economic sectors are growing or not, in order to regulate them well, but also in order to measure their impacts on the environment. The ultimate objective of any ocean economy measurement should be actually this production of a statistical information system that really measures how the ocean contributes to well-being, but also the impacts that economic activities have on the marine environment. This is typically really something that's very important. And this type of objective has been mentioned several times by different groups. Let me mention, for instance, a high-level panel on the sustainable ocean economy, which is convening quite a number of heads of state in order indeed to push for shared, I would say, views on how we can make the ocean economy more sustainable. And typically, their recent work on ocean accounts really links to this ultimate objective we have here. The good news is that we never had so many ocean economy publications around. In the past 3 years, here, this is just the past 3 years, there's been a profusion of different ocean economic assessments with sometimes environmental assessments. Our colleagues from Ireland, for instance, have been doing a lot of work with their statistics. We've had quite a number of different approaches. Here, let me mention particularly our colleagues from Portugal, which really sort of paved the way for many other countries to actually explore how satellite accounting could actually really improve their decision-making. The first satellite account for the ocean economy was produced by Portugal. It was followed then by our colleagues from the United States of America, which published last summer, the first experimental ocean economy account for the United States. Canada is right now producing the first holistic ocean accounts for Canadian objectives. These are just 3 examples. I'm going to come back to them. But main message here, so many reports being produced right now. And the good news also is that there's a consensus forming around what could be really measured. Here are just the studies with quantitative measurements by ocean economic activity. And we see that in many of these reports, marine aquaculture, marine fishing, maritime freight transport, passenger transport, the processing of marine fish, crustaceans, and mollusks, ports, activities. These are some of the top sectors that, of course, have been around for many, many years that are actually measured quantitatively. There are a few other sectors that still deserve a lot of attention. Let me mention here some of the lesser quantified sectors, such as ocean scientific research and development. Maybe a small note about here, offshore extraction of crude petroleum and natural gas. We do have a lot of data, but it's often in very specific reports too. So at the end of the day, the consensus on some of the things, some of the sectors that are actually well measured. At the OECD, as we started our work on the ocean economy, we, of course, that's our raison d'etre, we really started to measure different sectors too, and provided a first measurement of what we call the global ocean economy. We really focused on 10 sectors, and just these 10 sectors represented already 1.5 trillion USD in 2010. So that's already equivalent to the economy of Canada, the whole economy of Canada at that time. Projecting these numbers to 2030, it was really not done on purpose, but we got to a doubling, more than a doubling of these amounts for the 10 ocean-based sectors that we identify. So 3 trillions. So that was the equivalent of the economy of Germany at that time. So that was a very interesting exercise, but although we used a lot of official statistics, we did resort to a range of proxies to actually approximate some of the amounts that we were seeing for the initial measurements. Now, we've continued, and in this report here mentioned Rethinking Innovation for a Sustainable Ocean Economy, we have a whole chapter on new ways of measuring the ocean economy. And as a way forward, we suggested that satellite accounts, building notably on the advances made by Portugal, was really a good case to actually take better into account the ocean economic activities and beyond the ecosystem services that are provided by a very healthy marine environment. So here I'm just going to share over the next couple of slides some examples of some of the work that we have been producing. These are just value added for global activities in marine fisheries, fish processing, freight transport, passenger transport, shipbuilding, and marine aquaculture. This seems simple enough. You put together an Excel graph and you think, well, that's fine, you got the numbers. But it's not that simple, because to get to amounts that are credible internationally, you need to go to really the national levels, and very often at national level, you don't always have the data, or you need to actually be able to improve the data to make sure that it's comparable according to the sectors that you're looking into. What's very useful is that when you do that exercise, and frankly, that type of graph took us months to put together, but now we have very credible estimates. That type of information allows you to actually conduct strong and positive analysis that's going to be useful directly for a number of the decision makers, both in policymaking as well as in industry sectors. So here I'm just mentioning this graph that was published in a report that we produced with our colleagues within the House, the Development Directorate and the Environment Directorate. And I'm not going to go into many details here, but that's very useful analysis that you can do looking at the importance of different sectors in different countries by income groups. And here, a key message with reliable evidence now here is that the economies of developing countries rely more, on average, on these ocean-based sectors for income and jobs, much more than OECD countries. Typically, fishing in particular, marine fishing, accounts for 6% of the low-income countries and 8% of GDP for the lower middle-income countries. That may seem small, but it's actually huge in the economy of some of these countries, which are really suffering from overfishing and from issues in terms of fisheries management. Again, data, very important for making some decisions down the road. Tourism, obviously, is a very special case, as it represents more than 20% for a number of small island states. So at the end of the day, really producing reliable data is really important. But the frustration comes. We still have many questions to be answered. Value added, employment, they're obviously very important indicators, but they do not tell the whole story. How do these industries really relate to each other? How important is what we call intermediate consumption in production? When we're talking about fisheries and fish processing, where's the value? About imports, about exports, how much of the value added is actually traded? These are key questions for policymakers, but you cannot just get to these results with some of the indicators that I mentioned earlier. Also, the ocean economy is really going through some major structural changes. Here you just have a few headlines concerning the carbon transition that we are seeing for a number of actors. The energy transition is actually impacting very much quite a number of industries. But how can you relate then the advances in offshore wind with the new investments that are conducted by a number of multinationals that have been doing a lot of, I would say, their profits in oil and gas. See many structural changes going on. The same can be said for aquaculture. Aquaculture is going through a major revolution. Aquaculture has been around for literally thousands of years, but never at such an industrial scale that we are seeing. And where is the value actually coming from aquaculture? These are key questions. Again, we need to look at the structures of the industries and compare them. So the way forward would be ideally satellite accounting. So satellite accounting is a very specific, I would say, statistical exercise that national accounts do at country level in terms of actually producing specific accounts for specific areas of the economy. You have your national accounts where you derive your GDP. And on the side, you have satellite accounts, which are closely linked to the national accounts and that allow you to indeed get some good, reliable data on a number of economic sectors. Typically, we've done satellite accounting for tourism. There are satellite accounting for health. There are quite a number of different areas of the economy where there are satellite accounts that really work with international guidelines that have been produced at the UN with OECD inputs level, and that we can draw lessons from to actually take into account the ocean economies as a whole account here. So it's really a robust framework, proven framework, this satellite accounting approach, to monitor key parts of the economy. And that's where it's so interesting for the ocean economy. When you are basing your satellite account on the ocean economic activities that you have, you can then link this with environmental information. That's where you go into broad ocean accounts, having, if you remember, these two major pillars in terms of not only the ocean economic activities, but also the environmental activities included. And if I may, you add also some of the social indicators that you can then derive. So at the end of the day, we really believe that satellite accounting for the ocean economy is really a very positive way to move forward. I mentioned already some of the pioneering ocean example. I mentioned our colleague from Portugal, from the US, from Canada. But let me mention also some of the work going on in New Zealand, in China, in Australia. Australia really provided one of the largest and most interesting recent environmental assessment thanks to their work on the Great Barrier Reef. And Ireland also did an assessment of ecosystem services value. These are just a few examples. There are many other examples that exist around the world right now. A lot of activities, both on ocean economic activities as well on environmental accounting. Because at the end of the day, the objective really is when you build up your satellite account, you can not only take into account the ocean economic activities that you have, but you can also get a lot of inspiration now from major progress that have been made at international level in terms of the accounting for environment, not only in terms of what we call the system of environmental economic accounting, but also in terms of the ecosystems accounting. And just a couple of months ago, major progress has been made at the UN level in terms of the system of environmental economic accounting with the first exploration of what we call here the SEEA Ocean. It's really inspired by the SEEA water, where you do have indicators on economic activities linked to water, as well as the environmental, I would say, dimensions of looking at water. And this is really coming from, I would say, some well-known examples we have. So this is very positive. For us at the OECD, we have been focused on ocean economic activities. This is one of the pillars that we are looking into because we need to make progress. As I mentioned, we need to be able to actually capture a lot of the information from different ocean economic sectors to really identify how they're evolving. Again, because this has very strong impacts on revenues of companies, obviously, but also on jobs and on taxation down the road and on many other priorities for governments. So we have here, I just included a recent definition that we came up with thanks to a large international consensus within the STI Ocean Economy Group, which is supported by a number of key champions, I would say, of the ocean, where we have our colleagues working with us from the US, from Canada, from Portugal, from Ireland, from Belgium, from Italy. I have quite a number of countries here that I may forget here, but at the end of the day, this is really a consensus definition that's really useful for us for statistical purposes. And if you want to know more, we have this blueprint for improved measurement of the international ocean economy, an exploration of satellite accounting for ocean economic activity that was just produced, where you have a lot of details and statistical codes actually that are useful to actually build up statistics. And this report and this definition will help us at the OECD to actually build on existing data sets that we have, and with close work with a number of pilot countries, to actually build up the first OECD ocean economy satellite account. So I mentioned that Portugal paved the way at national level with the US and Canada that are really quite active in building up ocean accounts. At the OECD, we have so many interesting data sets that we want to be able to actually make sure that the ocean economy as a domain can be visible in OECD statistics and available, I would say, to the world to support analysts and decision makers. So at international level, that's something that we are trying to do. And we just launched the work right now, and we're open to a lot of cooperation with different actors around the world to actually make sure that this type of research is actually useful to many. But you can ask me, how can countries progress then on ocean accounting? Well, at the end of the day, a key lesson learned that we've had from our colleagues with whom we work very closely within the OECD is that ocean experts need to work closely with national accountants. So the good news is that we're seeing a lot of new activities going on. Norway is right now building its first satellite account for the ocean economy. And this is, again, a close cooperation between the National Statistical Office and many of the ocean experts within Norway. We have a number of steps in building a satellite account that exist, that you can get inspiration from, but most importantly, and that's a message that we've had many times from our former head of national accounts in the OECD, Peter van der Van, count. Whatever you have in terms of data, continue counting. Even if you do not intend to do a satellite account, the better evidence you will have will really come from counting the more activities as possible. So in terms of ocean economic activities, as well on marine ecosystem assessments. At the European Union level, there are requirements to actually conduct a number of environmental assessment, and we think it's going to be very useful for future ocean accounts. And the good news is that you're not alone. There's a large community of experts that are actually coming together. We have obviously the OECD group, but thanks to the work also on the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, there are other groups like the GOAP, the group on ocean accounting, that actually is bringing different parts of Asia together also, and as an international reach to actually exchange lessons learned. So there are indeed different communities that are coming together. So maybe in conclusion, I think we all realize that the ocean economy contributes to global prosperity, but the ocean is under major threat today. And what we need at the end of the day is evidence, not only on the role of the ocean for economic activities, but also on the role of marine ecosystems for global prosperity too. So at the end of the day, what we see here as the way forward is really the need to improve measurement of the ocean economy at local, regional, national levels. As I mentioned, count, 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 count. Sometimes you may be wrong and you can be corrected. Data can be always corrected, upgraded, but the important factor here is to really start somewhere. And the importance of exploring the development of ocean accounts with key stakeholders, I think, will be the next steps. We are at a time now which is very exciting, where I believe many countries can actually take the best off from recent experiences. No need to reinvent the wheel. There's a growing community, and I'm sure that many countries will really benefit from considering satellite accounting for their ocean economy. So with this, Conceição, I will stop here and ready to have a small discussion.
Thank you, Claire, for your intervention. Very interesting. Now let's move to questions and answers. You can post your question here in the platform in Q&A or directly in YouTube and also in WhatsApp. I will gather them and put here to Claire or to me. Let's see. We have here two questions in Q&A. I have, maybe we can start by the beginning. I have here one that says, does each ocean-related economic activity has a specific satellite account? So is the satellite account for a specific activity? For example, satellite account for fisheries or satellite account of maritime and transportation? I think this is a very good question to start our share of ideas. Claire.
So if I may, you can find in national accounts, for instance, fisheries in many countries around the world. You can also find some maritime and transportation statistics in national accounts. So your national account that helps you actually put together GDP and quite a few other economic indicators. You do have quite a number of industries that are already included in there. Sometimes not very detailed, but you do have a number of industries. The beauty of actually building a satellite account for the ocean economy is that you take all of these specific ocean-based industries and you put them, boom, all together in this ocean economy satellite account. So that allows you to actually capture all that has to do with the ocean in one place. So that's why we're looking into satellite accounts.
Claire, we have here many questions from WhatsApp and YouTube. Maybe I will start with some that are specific for the industries, and then we can move to the satellite accounts in terms of ecosystems and environment, because we have here also questions very interesting on that part. So I have here one question from WhatsApp. Do you know if Brazil has developed any effort to create a satellite account for the ocean economy? And I think I have another one that was very similar. Anyway, you can...
if I may say, for Brazil at this stage, I'm not aware that Brazil is actually right now exploring a satellite account. It may. I'm not aware at this stage of this approach from Brazil, but it would be very interesting.
Yes, and we have here also a question. Can you compare the global satellite accounts already published outside a limited set of sectors? Do they use always the same set of variables and indicators? There is some room for country-specific variables or indicators. This is a very, very good question in terms of national accounting.
Yeah, at this stage, what we're seeing is that a number of countries are putting together their their satellite accounts. So it's based really on their national accounts, on their national statistical system, and on the data they have. At the OECD right now, we're trying to put together a bit the same framework, but at international level, building on the data that we have. And a lot of the data we have is actually coming from national governments. So you see the connection, national governments trying to actually get a more detailed view of their ocean economy, and us at the OECD sort of exchanging also with national governments as to make this type of data available internationally. So this is a complex exercise, but at the end of the day, indeed, ideally, you would find more or less the same estimates, but in reality, national governments will have always more detailed data. As an example, in the United States right now, as part of their first experimental ocean accounts, there's a discussion for the second satellite account to actually go with data at state level. So a level below the federal level, as to inform better some of the state decisions on marine policies. So at national level, we will always have more details in their national satellite accounts.
We have here a question that I think many people want to have more information. Liz is asking, I would like to know if OECD has any strategy related to education and empowering of local professionals in ocean economy, especially for South Atlantic countries, the capacitation of local professionals and research in remote sensing, ocean modeling, and very important in order to normalize the ocean's knowledge. I think here we have the link between data we already have normalized in terms of national accounts, and also people that are providing data from the ocean data and observatories and so on, and also how we can give them some information about these new frameworks.
So at this stage at the OECD, at least in my group, what we're doing is that we're trying to produce standards, evidence, and data. What would be wonderful is to be able indeed to take all this and sort of go in different countries and carry, I would say, the torch and sharing and providing indeed education. Here, I think there's a strong cooperation which is possible, first with a number of countries, but also with a number of organizations that are typically looking at some of these issues. In terms, for instance, of the UN Ocean Science Decade, you may think, well, that has nothing to do with ocean economy measurement, but no, it's actually very much linked in a way, because we do believe that a lot of the science data that's going to be used to characterize marine ecosystems will down the road be useful to actually build up some of the environmental accounts. So you see there are links, and for the time being, well, we are not providing capacity building directly, but that's something that we are really thinking of more and more, because we see there's a strong interest in satellite accounting.
We have here a question that is, I can share our experience also. Bernice is asking, is there a general estimated cost for the establishment of a national satellite account for the ocean economy? Is it expensive? Is it possible? I think this is a very good question, Claire.
So I'm going to let you, Conceição, because you have way more experience on this than me, but we just had yesterday a presentation on ocean accounts at the Committee on Fisheries at the OECD, and the question came up from colleagues in Australia, New Zealand, quite a few other places, and the responses that we've gotten from the US, Canada, which were presenting at that time, was that, well, it's hard to say, but indeed it takes quite a number of people and quite a number, I would say, quite a lot of time to actually set up a satellite account. So indeed, the costs need to be taken into account. And this needs really a strong, I would say, political support to actually be useful at the end of the day. Conceição?
Yes, you are absolutely right, Claire. it's a process that is very time consuming. We should have the support at national level. We made our efforts in the context of the National Ocean Strategy, because at that time, Portugal had economic crisis, and one of the main targets in the National Ocean Strategy was to have a push in the blue economy. So we have to measure how we were improving that. And everyone wanted to have that information. So it was a national will from the politicians, from the people, and our National Statistics Institute were with us. They believe that they need to provide something, a tool to help the public policies. So it's a very time-consuming process. It's a knowledge process that needs people very aware on how national accounts work. But it's not like to put money in the problem. You need to involve people and consume people that are already working with the national politics, with the national policies and the national statistics. And then you need to involve people from the industry, because they better know what they do, how they do, what is the chain value, because this is a chain value analysis. So we made a lot of, how can I say, like a student trip with people, with the National Statistics Institute, and has to see how the ports work, how the fisheries sector work, and so on, because we need to track the whole chain value and then to translate that in terms of a statistical language that is international agreed. So it's like a Google translator, what we did. We put in one side people that know everything about the ocean industry, and then we translate that in terms of statistical language. And national accounts has like a dictionary at international level that you can use to translate this information. So this is the right way to go, not to have money to put in a big project, but to put people aware and people with time to consuming the project. I think it's our experience.
Excellent, Conceição. If I may, I'd like to take a few questions on environment and biodiversity. I mentioned here, I saw that there were a question on the importance of actually, the importance of the ocean to, biodiversity. So let me just mention here, I think this is going to be crucial as we look into ecosystem services. And I do believe that there's a lot of work that we can get inspiration from at national level, but in particularly, you may have heard about this the Dasgupta report, the Dasgupta review, which is an independent global review on the economics of biodiversity, which was commissioned by the UK government. I would really recommend you take a look. It's a huge report, but there's a lot of very useful information on the economics of biodiversity. As well as some of the advances that we are seeing in terms of the SEEA Ocean, the system of environmental accounting. I do believe this is not starting from scratch. There are some very good case studies that exist of marine environmental assessments. And I do believe indeed the community needs to sort of take this into account when looking at this second pillar that I mentioned, where we really need to take into account environmental accounts.
Yes, Claire, if I may add, it's important to share here that when we talk about environmental and also ecosystem service accounting, we have information in terms of physics numbers, tons and so on, and we can have money also, but it's not necessary to have a dollar in the environment. We do have good information to link activities with the environment using normalized statistic principles. And it's not mandatory to finish with a dollar value for the ecosystem, because many times people ask this: should we put a dollar value at the end?
I think you're absolutely correct. There are quite a number of ways to actually make sure that the value, and I'm not just saying the economic value, but the value of ecosystems are taken into account. And I saw Jose mentioned the reference in the chat here for those who are interested about the Dasgupta review. What other questions should we take on, Conceição?
I think here we have a question that permits us to demystify something that sometimes people ask. Renata is asking, should tourism be included in the ocean satellite account? Many times people ask me, can we add all the satellite accounts to have the national economy? So this question is very important because the satellite accounts can overlap. It's different views.
Absolutely, but the beauty of a satellite account, again, is that you have your whole tourism account, but what you're interested in is actually the coastal tourism or the tourism that can actually be impacted by the proximity with the ocean. And that's where you go into very exciting statistical discussions. What do you put in? And I know that Portugal, you are actually also thinking and trying to figure this out. Our colleagues from Canada, our colleagues from the US, many colleagues around the world are actually looking on how do you measure this impact of the ocean and on the tourism sector and vice versa. So obviously, in an ideal world, and I believe we will go towards an ideal world, we need to have tourism included, obviously, or part of the tourism in the satellite account for the ocean economy. A big reason for that too is that we need to be able to measure the impacts of tourism, and we need to feed data evidence for the policymakers also so that they make the right decisions. We saw some of the impacts of cruise tourism in many small island states, which are both benefiting as well as sometimes suffering a little bit from mass tourism. So here again, satellite accounting is a beautiful statistical framework to actually try and take into account all the different ocean economic activities, as well as some of the potential impacts of these activities. So that would be here my easy response, but in practice, it's quite nightmarish to actually make sure that you count the right things.
Yes, and the tourism is a good example to link this ocean satellite account and also the environmental accounting and the ecosystem service accounting, because here we have a very valuable sector that could have impacts that can be seen in the environmental account, but also they depend on the ecosystem service, because anyone wants to go to a place that is dirty and awful and so on, because we want to benefit in the coastal from a healthy ocean. So all these three parts are very linked. That's why ocean economy, we have industries, but we have also the natural capital and also the ecosystem services. It's part of the wealth of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a question also, does each country has its specific satellite account for the ocean economy? No, not yet. We're still at the start, really at the start. And my message here, and I think Conceição's message here also is, if you have this possibility, indeed try and explore what satellite accounts could actually do to actually improve decision making. At the end of the day, we believe it's a good way forward, but you don't need to go all the way to actually building up a satellite account to actually improve decisions. This is really, I would say, a goal in itself, but at the end of the day, what we need is better ocean economy measurement in every country of the world. And we may have ways to actually do that. There are groups, again, I mentioned, obviously the OECD, but also GoUp and quite a few others that are actually coming together, where we can actually see a lot of positive exchanges, capacity building, to help out a number of countries to get the best of what are right now some of the reference documents that they need to be aware of, for instance. And here, if I may mention, that might be worth putting, I think my colleague is here, to put the link to the report that we just produced, where there are quite a number of references, in particular to some of these groups, so that you are aware of what's out there in terms of satellite accounting and how can we better measure the ocean economy.
So we have here a lot of questions, Claire. The difficulties to select. Some are very specific, probably from people that are putting his hands in the data. For example, David is asking how we separate contributions for statistics coming from terrestrial activities and from marine activities. This is one of the main questions when we put our hands on data.
Absolutely. I would say one of the easy ways to actually first focus on the sectors that are typically maritime. Start with the, I would say, the low-hanging fruits. The sectors, you know, they're typically, you know, maritime. Then when it gets a bit difficult, like ports, you need to indeed start to look more closely at the different activities in the ports that you want to take into account. So it's not an easy answer here, but what I can tell you is that indeed there are quite a number of ways forward to actually start somewhere.
We have here some questions, for example, which environmental ocean indicators you think are essential for the revised statistical information system? What kind of indicators?
So Conceição, I think for the second satellite account in Portugal, you are considering already some of the potential environmental dimensions. Do you want to tackle this one?
Yes, I can. We are just in the start point, I may say, but what we are doing is to look into indicators we already produce for other platforms. In Europe, we have a directive that is a marine framework directive. We have a lot of indicators there. At global level, we have indicators that are recommended to the 2030 agenda. So we are looking into these indicators to see how we can link this with the ocean economy. So it's a start point. We have to start with something. So we have a lot of indicators, and we have, of course, some reports already published that we are looking into them and how to link this. So it's what we are doing by now. For now, it's what we are doing. And I think it's a good start point, because when we have the agenda 2030, we have some also international recommended indicators. So it could be a good start point to look into this part.
And to complement what you just said, Conceição, Another domain that deserves attention in terms of measurement, we will have to do with ocean scientific research and development, which is sometimes a large category where you can plug in many different things. And that links to a question we had here on ocean observations. Ocean observations is not considered as a sector per se. Obviously, there are many private commercial actors that are contributing to build up the ocean observing systems that we have today, but they are often very hidden in other statistics. So I do believe indeed that some progress will be made on this broader category of ocean scientific research and development, including commercial activities. As we see the Ocean Science Decade actually attract more attention, attract more actors, attract more commercial activities too, I believe that's going to be very interesting to actually try and measure some of the these economic activities.
Yes, we have here another question. I think it's more or less linked with what you said. João is saying satellite data interpretation, and mostly when one is trying to extract quantitative information, requires both a good understanding of how the data is being generated, and if it is applied to oceanic monitoring, one needs to have a minimum understanding of the ocean environment. For that, capacity building is mandatory. So it's a link.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why it's so important to actually have this connection between the ocean experts and the statisticians. None of the satellite accounts that we are discussing today have been built by statisticians hidden in their offices. They've been closely working. They've been with quite a number of ocean experts, plus different types of ocean experts. So I do believe it's a very good point that you made here in your comment, more than a question. This importance of actually making sure that whatever data is produced, it has sound, I would say, basis.
We have here another question, Claire. How do you propagate your collections and statistical analysis methods so that information and statistics collected is comparable and interoperable?
So that's a very good question, and that's a bit the daily work of the OECD. Try to get all our data from different governments, sometimes directly from the national accounts, and try to make them comparable internationally, and also to make sure that the definitions that are used nationally are then, I would say, understandable internationally. I do believe that indeed there are quite a number of steps that need to be made, that need to be taken, sorry, for making data comparable internationally, and that's something that we do all the time at the OECD. Now, the big challenge, obviously, is that we see many satellite accounts developing around the world, and we want to make sure at the end of the day that some of the data that are produced will be comparable, not directly, but that at least countries that are developing the satellite accounts can compare themselves with others. And this is why it's so exciting, some of the work that we're doing within the OECD and also with other groups to make sure that we use more or less the same definitions, that we have the same understanding of what we want to put in satellite accounts. And that's why our ongoing work with pilot countries, such as Portugal, Canada, the US, Ireland, will be, I think, very, very interesting for us and for these countries and for the international community, as we really try to find consensus on, again, getting comparable data over time.
Claire, we have here another question that is very linked with what we were discussing before the meeting. We have one question that is asking us, can we measure ocean economy without satellite accounts? And I could say, what do you say about this?
The quick answer, yes. that goes back to what I was saying in my last slide. Count, 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 count. You don't need a satellite account to actually base a sound decision on how you want your ocean economy to become more sustainable. You don't need a satellite account. But in an ideal world, that's going to help a lot. So what I would really recommend here is indeed to take a look at what is measured already at national level. And usually countries do have some data. And then, think that it's really the baseline to actually consider later on a satellite account. But at this stage, measure, count, count, count. That's always very useful. And again, there are definitions that exist, international guidelines, standards for environmental assessments. There are some lessons learned, some best practices that are shared at the UN level. So you never start from scratch. There are some good practices that do exist already. And satellite account, well, that would be the ultimate objective. But you don't need a satellite account to actually base already some good decisions on reliable data, as long as you build up time series using some common definitions.
Claire, I would say that you can measure without a satellite account, but it's not the same. And
absolutely.
And if someone asks you what is the ocean economy in your country in terms of GDP, you will not be able to answer. And that was the question that people asked us in the beginning of our process, and we couldn't answer. And people used to say us, but how you can say that you don't know how much you worth in your GDP?
Absolutely. So really the advice here is measurement and then aim for a satellite account. That would be the wonderful step. But still, we realize that it's a huge undertaking.
Yes, and we have here some questions about the social aspects, how we can deliver something in terms of the social analysis. And I think we can develop something here because we have already some information.
Absolutely. When you talk about sustainability, you do have environment, you have the economic, and you have social. I mentioned these two pillars for statistical purposes, the economic activities in the ocean, as well as the environment and the marine ecosystems. Underlying all this, obviously, there are social aspects. The well-being of workers, for instance, need to be taken into account. You need also to take into account quite a number of other, I would say, social aspects that really can be measured even today, and that can find their way in these holistic ocean accounts. You wanted to mention something here, Conceição, I think.
Yes, if you go, for example, to our website, we have there information, for example, about the average wage. We have information. Sometimes when we use other statistics, we have the number of people employed, but we don't know if that people work, for example, 1 hour a day, and how much they work. And here with the satellite account, we have the number of people in full time. So if we have 2 people working just half time, we just count 1 people. And if we compare with other statistics, we can see some social indicators relevant. We can, for example, see productivity and how the ocean economy is in comparing with the whole economy. So here we have some social indicators that complemented with other information are very interesting.
Absolutely. So if I may just mention here, I saw a question from from Frank about the importance of ocean to communities that have very low economic resources and for which monetized value may be difficult to come up with. I totally agree with you. We need to make sure that the discussions we are having right now on statistical measurement and the importance of developing satellite accounts can actually also find resonance in a number of countries which may not have all the resources to develop such a statistical framework easily. And the good news is that we have quite a number of programs that exist to actually help develop, improve some of the statistical framework. Maybe I can mention just here the World Bank programs, some of which are actually specifically looking at ocean accounting. This is, I think, an interesting way forward in order to build up capacity in terms of building up the evidence for improved decision-making down the road. So again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a community that's growing that really is looking right now at ocean accounting. And I think right now is the perfect time to actually join this community, get to understand a little bit what goes on. Take maybe not everything, but use some of the standards and best practices that are starting to be shared in order to build up your own, I would say, evidence.
Claire, I think we are a bit behind our schedule. I think we covered all the aspects I see in the questions, not all the questions, but the thematics. So maybe we can finish. But before I finish, I would like to remind you that we are starting this year with the UN Decade for the Ocean Science. And in fact, we are starting the Ocean Decade. The world depends a lot on the ocean, and as all of us know that. But to guarantee the sustainable ocean management, we need better data and better information, including about the ocean economy, not just marine data. So often we listen that we know better the moon than the ocean, and probably this is also applicable in some way to the ocean economy. So today we had the opportunity to listen here how we can do more and better. So we are coming to the end of this Friday networking, but looking into the audience here today, I don't resist to challenge you to start here our networking, to enlarge the discussion, and to expand our understanding about ocean satellite accounts, and about how we can effectively enlarge its scope to include an ocean environmental account and or a marine ecosystem service account. Thank you for your presence here today and for this so interactive section. Thank you all, hoping to see you in coming sections of these Networking Fridays of Air Center. Thank you all and stay wealthy.
Bye everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And looking forward to have a lot of discussions with many of you over the next few weeks, months.
Yes, thank you.
And thanks, Conceição, and thanks, Jose.
Thank
you. Thanks to the Air Center.